Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to my channel, PQ Vox. Tonight I got a special program for you guys. I mean, all my programs are special, but this one's even more special. I've got a special show. I've called it Journey into Conspiracy. Comic book fans and conspiracy fans will understand why that is called that. But I have a special co-host here for this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, the great, the amazing Paul RIVOCHE. What's going on, Paul?
Hey, Patrick. Thanks for the kind words.
Yeah. Well, you are. You're great and you're amazing. Everybody knows that.
Thank you.
And actually,
We're all amazing. Let's all be great. Wait, who said that?
No, stop. We're not off to a good start.
Okay, plow on.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Paul. I'm excited to talk about conspiracies with you. I think for this evening, we're kind of focusing on, I don't want to say it, level plane and
Sure.
giants. So we're going to get to what we get to. If we have a good conversation about one subject, we might not get to the other. It doesn't matter, because it's good to just talk about things. Let's see who we have in the chat here. It's my good friend Adam Weber. What's up, Adam? How you doing today, man?
Hello there. Yeah, and there's so much to go over, right? Like we talked about in messages, and like everybody knows that's dug into any of this stuff. Each thing is, I don't like rabbit holes, but the term, but a lot of these things have been kind of polluted. But if you want to use that terminology, like rabbit holes, there's just so many things, and they all connect. And we can get into talking about that. But I was hoping, like in the show, there'll probably be, depending on how many people we get watching, but even on the replay, you get a whole spectrum of people. You get people who are like on one extreme end, the jeer, mocker, point and laugh, drive-by type people. Isn't that idiotic? But they're kind of curious, so they're tire kickers. Yeah. You get people in the middle who are kind of wavering, and you get people who are kind of studied up on this stuff and might want to be in light company and just enjoy like hashing over this stuff.
Yeah. And, there's no need to, there's people who like to get angry about things like this, which is funny. I'm sure you've had, I know as a matter of fact that you have had conversations where people get mad about just you posing the concept. And that's what we're here to do. We're just here to pose the concept. You don't have to believe what we believe, that kind of stuff. I love you got the globe with you. That's awesome.
We're here to at one point see if this is real or not. Okay. I'm really ready. Very ready. Yeah, and let's not get mad, because on one hand it's funny. Like, it's funny, but the way I look at it is there's all these crowds of people pointing, right? They say, you're brainwashed, and the other side says, you're brainwashed. Like, and you get into this thing where it's like you spun around and it's blind man's bluff, like that game you played when you were a kid.
Yes.
And it's like, who's brainwashed? Is it like the people who are what you can call normies? And in the so-called flat earth or level plane, community, there's just all these insulting terms like, globetards versus, what do they call them?
Globetards.
They do.
I love those though. I know it's like, it's not fun to insult. It's not good to insult people, but some of those insults are like so low effort that they're kind of funny.
Yeah. So, for me, I would put it this way, that there's the different levels you can look at it. Like there's that whole comic level and just enjoyment of it. Deeper down, I do think that it's important because, like it or not, every single human being, you've got a cosmology, you've got a spiritual belief, you've got you can't avoid these things when you're deposited here. You're like suddenly aware of yourself at whatever age, and you're like a little kid, and you're like, and you're like, wait, I exist. And then you have to face all these things. So like it or not, it is kind of on one level serious, because you base your life on what you end up deciding. On the other hand, when you see the whole way that it plays out and the twisting in the media and all these different so-called conspiracies, and the way that they're all spun by this, the spin masters, the nudge units, all that stuff. It's funny in a way.
Yeah. I think it's probably easier for people who've had experiences in their lives where their whole paradigm was shifted, maybe against their will. So it's easier for them to look at other things that maybe they don't agree with necessarily. Like, because it's one thing to talk about politics, oh, I don't like this politician, I don't like this politician. It's an entirely different thing to say, hey, the entire concept of the world as it is not real. You know what I mean?
That is exactly it. And like, we're in these channels. We grow up with stuff we're told as little kids, and we accept it all. And some of it might be real, verifiable by our own experience. But other stuff we don't ever verify. We just take it on trust, from authorities, experts. And it's also social channeling, because if everyone's moving in that direction, you don't want to be going against the grain unnecessarily, because it leads to friction and conflict. So people are trying to kind of channeled that way. But you're right, Patrick, that when you have like, this certainly applies to me, like when you have a big shock in your life, things that break you out of it, and you're forced to face the contradictions. That's why, as we were joking on Twitter, for some people it might even be, hey, this Mike Tyson thing, like, wait a minute, the guy was like perfect dodging it, and then he's like, then he's old man Tyson when he's out there. And so they're shocked, right? Because everyone's been telling them, look, it's rigged, and you're being fooled. But then they need to see the evidence. They need to experience it directly. So that can happen with all these topics. And that's something I actually wanted to get into, is even ask you, and we can go back and forth, but ask you about how we got into that, how we got into this stuff, because a lot of people avoid it. Like, they kind of sense in their peripheral vision mentally that, hey, there's different stuff, there's different explanations, but they don't want to go into it.
Right.
It will separate them from their peers. It will cause problems, like we saw during convoy times, right? So people just kind of go, no, shut up, and they just keep going.
Yeah, like you mentioned the Tyson stuff. I just wanted to show this real quick. For his next fight, Jake Paul to challenge the exhumed corpse of Muhammad Ali. Just good stuff.
Is that the Babylon Bee? What did it's just the guy?
Was it the Babylon Bee? Let's see.
I don't know.
I know David Williams reposted it, but yeah, I think that is the Babylon Bee. Yeah, it is. Yeah, there is Babylon Bee. There it is.
Okay.
Yeah. I just thought that was funny.
Hilarious.
We got Shadowpunk in the chat here. He says, "Did someone say conspiracy? What's up, Shadowpunk? Oh, Shadowpunk, have I been meaning to message you?" Shadowpunk actually did a 3D model for me of one of my comic book characters.
Oh, good.
And then I had it printed, and I finally got a good version of a printing. I don't know. He says he printed it off easy peasy at his place, but all these people who I've been working with, they couldn't do it right. But I finally got somebody to do it right, and it's cured and it's ready to be painted. And I'm very excited to show you guys. It's like a full, 5 inches figure of a character I made. It's like a crazy, it's wild to think about.
And is it done in 2 pieces, Patrick? Because when I bought an anatomy model, I've got it over there. It looked like it was glued together from different.
No, it's 3D printed. So
yeah, no, I know, but does it all print up in just one piece?
From what I can tell, there's no seam lines or anything like that.
Yeah,
there are like little nibs where you would see things like almost like scaffolding come in.
Right.
There's no seam lines or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's very cool, dude. Oh, Shadowpunk, I can't wait to show it to you. But thanks for popping in the chat, man. I appreciate it.
And I agree with you. Go against the grain.
Yes.
At least question things, right? Like people don't activate their, man, it's like the same with bodies, you end up 60 and you're shuffling around, or 70, and it's the same with the mind, right? They don't like even challenge stuff.
Mm-hmm. He says building those weapons was no easy feat. You did a great job, man. That was a perfect VSS, and I'm a stickler, so it was very nice. Okay, well, let me get back on track here. Before we get started into the conspiratorial talk, by the way, did you get my journey into conspiracy reference? I'm sure you would.
No, probably. Is it like a comic book? The
Journey into Mystery.
Mystery, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not as big a comic book nerd as you might expect. I kind of stopped reading comics I guess that's earlier, but yeah, I stopped reading comics in the late 70s. So I kind of I was aware of them, but I didn't like avidly. Anyway, but that was earlier. So yeah.
Yeah, that was anyway. So before we get going though, I'd like to talk about both of our current ongoing things. So I have here, is it all right if I show everybody your eBay page?
Oh, please. Yeah, I was going to mention that. So you're doing my work for me. Thank you.
No, thanks for coming on my show. It's the least I can do. All right, let's see here. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been putting up stuff on my eBay page, and I'm kind of building it out constantly. So I've got original art now. I should say as a caveat right now, I mean, it's a bit of a weird moment because I want people, of course, to go and order if they'd like to, or even later when they see this, might be better if they see a replay of this, because right now, unfortunately, Canada Post has gone on strike. So if anybody orders something, I can't ship within the 3-day window. But anyway, just having put out that disclaimer, I have been doing all these different drawings. These are like little smaller canvas board drawings, which are kind of cool. They're very sturdy. And I've been doing those to offer something kind of lower price because, a lot of original art nowadays, as people would know who are into it, it's gotten really pricey. So
Oh yeah.
I've been offering different things. You can see there scrolling by, there's some of my animation work, different drawings like the one there for if you one more down, or that one is one too, but that's got a better photo. That one you're on now. Yeah. It's from Superman animated. So it was like a pan drawing that I did as a design for the Superman animated show. I think if you click on it, you might get a bigger version, but that's up to you.
I'll have to switch tabs. Hold on.
Yeah, that's okay. No, that's fine.
I went way too far out there.
My
eyes aren't that good. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I've been kind of building out these different pieces of what you can call a platform. Like it's been a whole curve in the last year, a whole learning curve. Like YouTube, learning about streaming. I set up this eBay store, and it's been going well. People have been buying stuff, which is really gratifying. And thank you to everybody who has. So I ship out real quick, usually next day, and sometimes I throw in an extra little sketch. And as I said, I've got a variety of things ranging from like books, like the one you bought from me, Patrick, the comic book, to animation work. I've got original art pages. Yeah, cool. Cool. Thanks for showing that. And yeah, I've got original art drawings. Some comic book pages I'll be putting up later. Yeah, but like I said, my emphasis right now is just to get it going, start getting it stocked, and make more affordable stuff for people. Because not everybody wants to pay $500 or $1,000 for like a full size piece of art. So
yeah.
So
amazing stuff, dude. This is just amazing work. If you guys haven't seen Paul's work before, you should go to this eBay. It'll give you a good idea. This eBay it's got so much great stuff on it. Wait a minute. What is this?
Well, that's a book of all my Batman Beyond design art. So what it is years ago, I printed it through Lulu, lulu.com. And now I may revive some of these and put them on Amazon. But anyway, I'll probably rejig them a little bit because, this was before the advent of Amazon buying Kindle direct publishing. So that book, anyway, was one I self-printed. That has, I think, 100 pages of my Batman Beyond design art. If you click on the different things.
Oh my God!
And it's still available for a nice price. It's a little bit with the shipping, but I have a bunch of copies I found when I just closed down my storage unit. So there's a whole bunch of these different copies. I have probably 15 or 20 left. I haven't counted them, but that's the idea. And yeah, it's a book just
amazing,
showing all the different stuff that I did. It's a selection because I probably did, I don't know, a few hundred easily, maybe more designs.
So this would just be in the background, right? While the animation was played over the top of it?
Yeah. What this is the, depending on what you or the viewers know about the animation process, like the Warner studio in LA would have done the pre-production. They did the storyboards, the writing, the storyboards. They did character designs. I was hired in cases like this, among other people, to do background designs. So these were drawings that were then sent as a package, all of that stuff sent to an overseas studio, sometimes in Japan or elsewhere. And they would build out the final art from these guidances. So this art was not used directly on screen,
gotcha.
But it was planning art for what the different settings would look like. So some of those ones, like there, it's a line drawing. Usually I did 3 versions of each one. I did it in pure line. So you could see it uncluttered from having the darks and the tones. And that would be the next 2 stages. I would add blacks and then add gray tones. Now those are from earlier days of computer. I kind of used simple gradient fills and things. Amazing. And fortunately, I kept copies or scans of everything I did. So then I slapped it all into this book about 2010, I think. printed a bunch, but this was in the early days of the internet. And so, and before really digital book selling was as ramped up as it is now. So I didn't sell, sold some in a whole bunch of conventions, but I had some leftovers, let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of forgot about it. So now it's kind of cool that, you know, there's an audience for that. It's been more time. People grew up with some of these shows. There's interest. So it's great that there's a reception for it. And so on my eBay page, I thought, hey, I'll offer these, you know, and yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, it's great that you have, because everybody wants you to do a book and they want to buy your book, you know? And so it's great that you've got something here to like sate the appetite, at least for a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's in the works. I might have an announcement before too long. Nothing I
Very
can
nice.
be too specific about yet, but
Yeah.
it's definitely in the works. I mean, for me, it's been a series of, like I said, rebuildings, you know, like getting back with more of a presence. The eBay store is to help keep the cash flow going. And as I investigate into getting into doing a crowd fund, because that's a whole thing, right? And I'm very careful to not overcommit and just plunge into something. The main thing, as I've said on other streams, is I'm up here in Canada, so I have to probably face the idea of remote fulfillment. Well, Shadowpunk, we won't talk about that. Let's hope Mr. Warner is not.
Take that comment down.
Hey guys, there's no profit in this. So
let's move on from that subject, shall we?
It's a review book. It's a book reviewing fair use, reviewing the drawings that I did. I'll take a swig of my nice fizzy water and we'll move on.
Right. Well, yes, ladies and gentlemen, go over there right now. There's a bunch of different things. I'm going to bring that up one more time here. There's a bunch of different options here for you across a course of different prices here. Like once I get off this stream, because I don't want to dox myself. I mean, anybody who gets my book will see where I live. But anyway, I'm going to buy this because I want it. Like that's
okay,
that's the thing about your art, Paul, is like there will be things that I see and I go, it will be mine now. Like it's.
Well, thank you. It's great to be.
And this is what I have, folks. Ooh, let me show them this. This is what I have. 4-story right here. Let me make myself big. This is what I've got right here. This is the first thing that I saw that Paul was offering. At least that was the first post you made on eBay or on Twitter. So then I saw that and I instantly got this. 4 different stories. Just not only are the stories themselves, not only are the concepts behind them brilliant. Like I wouldn't instantly think that I was going to love this more cartoony style, but then this headgear that they're wearing was just amazing. And they're like flying around with like jet turbines strapped to their heads. This is just fantastic. And then you got the last story was very, very funny. This is somewhere, I guess, how would you describe it? I feel like it's somewhere in between like cartoony and a little bit like hyper realistic.
Yeah, well, listen, thanks, Patrick, for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. So what this is, it's a story called Big Dome, and it was printed in Flight 5, which is, I don't know if you guys would know that there's a guy called Kazu Kibyushi, or if I mangled his name, but he did this whole series called Amulet. It's a real big bestseller. Scholastic has been printing books. I think there's 9 of them. But before he did that, when he was a bit lesser known, he organized an online anthology. Like he organized it online. There were forums and things where there's a series of anthology books, and they were called Flight. So there was I forget 5, 7, or maybe 7 volumes, and so he invited me to participate, and I did this story. And what that story that you just showed was the 2 different stories you showed there were kind of like variations on the same theme. That I have this weird obsession with these flying helmets. Like so the second story you showed was a guy called Big Dome. Like I get these ideas and then spin-offs come off them. So that gave me an opportunity to experiment with them. So the second one was a little bit more of a serious, not serious, but it was a little more serious of a style than the very cartoony one, which was like kids. And then the other one was, I grew up on like British comics with these boarding school, like the adventures, and you know, that kind of stuff, like American comics, British comics. So I was thinking of kind of like, what if there was a boarding school that was like for these kids in like an aeronautical academy,
Uh-huh.
and they're playing pranks on each other and that kind of thing. So I was kind of intersecting that British sort of humor, my attempt at it, with like Miyazaki's world of strange flying things, worlds above in the clouds, and all
Yes.
that stuff. So that's
Yes.
where that came from.
It's honestly like I didn't at first I was like, what is that on their head? And then later I was like, this is brilliant. Like this is like we need a whole series with people with that
Yeah,
rocket thing attached to their head. I guess it would be like, more stories of what was his name? Because that was great. Did you wrote that too, right?
yeah, I wrote them all. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the writing on that one is probably my favorite. And they called me Big Dome. That one, yeah. The writing in this is it's so great. And you're right. Now that you say that you like British humor, that reminded me a lot of that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, no,
And
and I have ambitions to do more with all of those things because, you know, as with any of us with personal characters, it's stuff I love. It came from me, and you know, you put it out there. Now, again, that was kind of in the earlier days. The internet has evolved with all the streaming and you know YouTube and everything, and crowdfunding and CG, and so my ambition is moving forward is as I ramp all this up and kind of get smooth with it, is to move into doing more of that stuff and put out those different things.
mhm.
So yeah, that's thank you for focusing on that. And I'm sure
Yeah.
you have your own stuff to promote here, and we can get into delivering what we promised, which is
Yes.
to get string cheese brains going.
That's right. All right, let me show this real quick and then we'll move on. Where is it? There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Phenomenal Tales #1, Minotaur, set in a post-apocalypse alternate universe Soviet Union. The Soviet Union in the year 1996, they've got to fend off an incursion, a border incursion by the People's Republic of China. So you can see here the Red Army versus the Chinese Army. I don't know what they call themselves. The Short Army. um, so, but that's the least of the Red Army's problems because we've got hideously mutated bands of roving monsters that go throughout the countryside. They're known as rad monsters. And there's one particular monster that's been wiping out entire camps of men, both the Russian and the Chinese. So our hero in quotation marks, Minotaur here, is tasked by the Red Army command to find and capture this monster so they can study it for the war effort. But the holy Mongolian mountains hold a dark and terrible secret that might just spell doom for Minotaur. Ladies and gentlemen, this is only $10 right now on Fund My Comic. I went up from $5.57 to $6.69 in the past day, so that's awesome. Thank you guys so much. You can also get my first comic, Phenomenon Comic Magazine #1. This one now it's the third cover. It has a Jimmy Reyes cover. I mean, look at this beautiful thing. It's great. Jimmy Reyes let me scroll down to the big one. Jimmy Reyes's artwork is fantastic, and he really did a bang up job with this cover. I've been saving it in my back pocket for like months, and now here it is. And then obviously the main cover, excuse me, was done by the great Peter Gilmore, who also does the colors on this book. It's me who writes it and creates it, obviously. We got the line work by Claudio Sepulveda. I actually want to ask you, Paul, if that's the right term. He does all the pencils and the inks. Do I just call that line work then?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's maybe not a commonly used way to describe it, but that's fair enough. I mean, I think people can figure that out. You could say art.
Okay. So I could just say
Yeah.
art that people wouldn't get like, oh, well, the colors are art too.
That's true. You could say line art. That might be the clearest
Line
way to
art.
put it. Yeah,
That's
line
it.
art.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. I meant to ask that. And then obviously colors by Peter Gilmore and the cover by Peter Gilmore, who also does the colors for both the Phenomenal Tales #1 and the second printing of Phenomenon Comic Magazine #1. So $8 for shipping nationally. Internationally, it's $30. Paul, you know that pain. So
Oh, I know.
that's where we are these days, folks. But anyway, all right, let's get into it here. I'll share this that you shared with me.
Yeah. So this is a good jumping off point. I mean, and again, like I said a bit earlier, for different people, they're in different places, right? So there's people who And I'm assuming that anyone who's going to listen to this length is not in the point and laugh kind of thing, which is like a reflex that's implanted into people. In the next phase, you get into people who will look at stuff and try and examine it critically and engage with it. So this is a guy, an account I follow, and I thought this was a good summary. I don't agree with everything this fellow says, but he is in the camp of, he says that he's not a flat earther. And that's really how I would call myself too, because I don't want these labels. It's like when someone calls you a conservative, it comes prepackaged.
Mm-hmm.
And then for different people, they have different associations with these things. I mean, I don't call myself a conservative anyway, because as I said, in the political topic, I don't believe in all that stuff being completely real the way it's presented to be real and organic. So I don't like those labels. But even if I was in that zone, these prepackaged labels are kind of mind stoppers. So people go, oh, I know all about that.
Right.
And really, in fact, that's the way all these things work. Like labels and words stop people from thinking for themselves and engaging directly. So this guy said, how about this? Earth isn't a globe in space. The stars are close and living entities. The moon is a self-illuminated supernatural object. Men will never go there. Evolution was a lie. Atoms never existed. And most human knowledge is wrong and misconceived. Can you handle that? So that's kind of mouthful, isn't it? And
Yeah.
Most people will just go, oh, this is like idiotic, right? And I guess that gets us as a start into, I mean, maybe we can do that briefly, Patrick. Like, I just find it interesting, and maybe the viewers would too. Like, how did you come to being, and that's why we're doing a stream, is because, a lot of people, particularly older, like in my age group, I'm in my 60s, I'm 65. It's like, they're just not going to even, they've just spent their whole life in this world of these ideas. And these bedrock ideas, like if you say these big, it's one thing if you say, oh, Mike Tyson, it was a bit rigged, right? That's like up further up in the branches of the ideas, but groups of ideas go like tree trunks, trees, like there's root ideas, there's main branches, and then there's smaller branches, and they're all connected, but we don't realize it. So if you cut off things, like if you say space isn't real, people just freak out because they just cannot believe that they could be so wrong about such basic stuff.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to get into that. But anyway, even to engage with it, you have to have some triggering event. So I'm curious if you have any particular triggering event, because you're young,
yeah.
like,
Yeah. So it's funny because my life has been like an exercise of things coming back around, and maybe everybody's life is like that, and I'm just young and I'm just realizing that now.
Yeah,
But the first thing that I saw was, it was the year 2017. I worked at the YMCA. I logged into my email, and it was Yahoo email, and
yes,
there was this article about the Smithsonian taking giant bones and destroying them.
right.
And I don't know what it was that day that made me like, I guess I'll read into this. But I did. I read into it, and I was like, this is really actually terribly fascinating. And then my first thought was ridiculous and completely unreal, though. But then I got down the train of the UFO stuff. So I started going down UFOs. And then, the chat can believe me. The chat cannot believe me. I'm what I would consider an extremist Christian. And I was like, God, you got to let me know. Like, is this stuff real or is it not real? And so I asked for wisdom in regards to these things, because biblically, God loves when people ask for wisdom.
Yes,
so I
agree.
just said, just show me. Like, I don't care what it is. And I was working at I was the director of a childcare center. And I made dinner for the kids. It was a 24-hour center. I made dinner for the kids, and then I was taking the trash out, and I go out to the dumpster behind the building, and I throw the trash into the dumpster. And at that exact moment, there was this, like, it wasn't a voice that I heard, but it was just like a feeling of like, hey, turn around and look up. Like, it was just something telling me to do that. And so I responded by saying, okay. And I turned around, and there was this black triangle in the sky. Wow. And it was probably about 7:12. What was the exact 7? It was between 7:12 and 7:33, because I left at 7:30 from the workplace because I was so shook. But I looked around and I saw this black triangle, And I'd been studying UFOs, so I was like, okay, well, you know, is it gonna act like UFOs do generally? And this is before AI and all this stuff, mind you guys, because that is actually a super important thing. Is that nowadays with videos of things, there's almost no way to know if the video was real or not,
Exactly.
and that's horrible. Because I was alive long enough to see videos that you could go, okay, that's CGI, or that's real without, you know,
Yeah, but now they've converged into, yeah.
yes. And I think the worst part is that my experience of UFOs up to that point and watching videos, real videos of UFOs, you can start to pick out like what's real and what's not. And the way that they move and the way that they do things is there's something unnerving and strange about it that is not capable of being replicated by CGI, but AI can replicate it. I've noticed this, and it's kind of, which is also a damning thing. That's another tangent, but we're not going to get into that yet. The point is, I saw this black triangle. I'm like, okay, well, if it starts doing crazy, and then it started flipping around like a leaf, like
Weird.
floating, like down into this, down from the sky. It was about the size of a guitar pick to me from my vision, so I would wager it was about 30 meters across. It was a perfect, what do you call that? Perfect triangle, a equilateral triangle, and it had like faint lime green lights on every corner. So I'm watching it go by and I'm like, okay, that's weird. And I'm like looking around to see if anybody else notices this. No one else is anywhere within earshot or anything like that.
Well, it sounds like this
Naturally.
TR3B business, right? Isn't that the name for that?
Yeah, exactly. So it flies over me and it starts heading towards the St. Louis airport. And I'm like, well, that'd be curious if a plane comes by because there's, you know, sometimes they fly in parallel with planes. Lo and behold, it's going this way. The plane is coming this way. It gets to the plane and it goes, yoop. And then it starts going in parallel with the plane. And at that point, I was like, okay, like that's that. Things can't do that. And then once the plane got over my head, it went yoop again, and it went back in the direction of the airport and disappeared into, it was a pretty heavy cloud cover, about half a mile out. So that was like a moment for me where I was like, because I'd done the studying, I'd seen what the government had to say, I'd seen what the experts had to say,
Yeah,
and then I saw it with my own eyes, and they were all like,
right.
"It's not real," and it's like, well, it is. So now you all are liars, and like I couldn't. That was the breaking point for me. At that point, it was like I can no longer trust authority because this is the most important subject on the planet, or on other maybe not on other planets,
Yeah,
no
yeah.
pun intended, and they are saying it's not real, and I'm just some dude and I saw it with my own eyes, and I know it's real. So I know you guys with government and, you know, all your technology, your radar, your high-speed cameras, all that stuff, you've got it. You know all about it. So that was the point for me where I was like, I need to never trust what anybody says again. I need to verify on my own and make up my own mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Reagan, trust but verify.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, that's really what we're talking about, isn't it? It's like activating your brain. It doesn't mean uncritically absorbing everything that anyone says. It means filtering, right? So you're going to re-examine your basic premises and try and see if there's flaws, because usually people are just so uncritical. They think that everything's been explained in the world, that there are no unexplained bits and pieces. The scientists have taken care of everything, whether it's micro or macro, like the universe being big, micro being the invisible world, quantum physics, atoms, all this stuff, viruses running around attacking us, and all this stuff that they tell us. People accept all this stuff, and it leads to a kind of boredom. Um, but you're saying that that was kind of a trigger event for you, Patrick, where you
Oh yeah.
were kind of like, hey, I gotta re-examine a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and then I reported it to MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, if you
Oh,
guys have
okay.
ever heard of that.
I
And
have, yeah.
they had me come to their monthly meeting because they said that my report was the most detailed report they'd ever received, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool," you know. And they had me talk about it, and they mentioned to me, because this is the first time I'd been to one of their meetings. They were like, "Yeah, well, there's been reports of about 30 plus black triangles in St. Louis in the past month, and yours was the most detailed report." And I was just
Mm.
like, huh. And now I'm thinking, obviously the TR-3B stuff, and I'm thinking about how
Yeah.
the Boeing factory is right there
Yeah,
in
yeah.
St. Louis, and I'm like, oh,
See,
okay.
and when was that, by the way?
2018, October 27th, 2018.
Okay, because I mean, this is where it gets complicated because, as I said in at some point to someone, I forget who I said it to, but the thing is that some of these, see, what's very interesting about, like, there's so many just different connections of this stuff, but one observation is that when you go into venturing into re-examining your ideas and they all start floating around, because you have factoids or facts, and then you have connections between them, which makes a structure, and that's your beliefs. When you rearrange them, like you go, UFOs are real or not real, this, it becomes a belief system. So when you start rearranging them, and particularly when they get fluid, like the ground is, earthquake, that's where it can get dangerous for people because
Yes.
you get cognitive dissonance, you get extreme anxiety and confusion and even fear. And people don't usually want to experience that because it's not really fun. And you don't know how to, quell it or solve it. So I understand that that's the whole psychological side of this. Trying to remember where I was going to go with that, but basically, I guess if that was your trigger event, we all have a different way that we get into these kinds of topics. Like, I've always been a bit of a sort of a kind of a bit of a rebel or a questioner, but I still was probably for most of my life still basically in the mainstream, but objecting. But for me, it was probably the last 3 to 5 years with all this lockdown business and seeing what people, the way that everybody was channeled was so shocking that it forced me to start looking. And also the sheer boredom of being stuck in the apartment. I work on my own anyway for many years as a freelancer. But my little way of answering my own question is, like, what triggered me is, there was one morning I was drinking coffee and I was looking at YouTube, and the way on my phone, the way the algorithm coughs up things, it started coughing up for whatever reason 9/11 things. We don't have to talk about that too much because I don't know
Well,
what's
it's a topic for a different day.
Yeah, but
just wait till we get to circumcision, folks.
yeah, don't get me going on that. But,
I know.
That's really, people don't like that topic. But,
that's why we're going to talk about it, Paul.
Yeah, I just go anywhere because that's what that part of my character, it just annoys me. This whole thing, like, oh, you can't talk about that. Because I think if you're a real patriot and freedom person, an intellectual free speech person, then examine anything. If you have a good counter argument, great. But don't just say, oh, you can't talk about that or get angry. But anyway, I'm in my apartment drinking coffee and we'd been locked down too long, and I thought, you should be intellectually consistent. I thought in my internal monologue, because I realized that I hadn't actually examined the 9/11 things and the moon landing stuff. And I had always dismissed it. And for some reason, I had what you referred to, Patrick, as that spirit of wisdom come over me. And I'd been asking for it because I was just so upset and angered at all this idiocy with this lockdown stuff. Like in Canada, I'm sure it was just as bad in the US, but it was particularly nastily idiotic here. They were closing down streets in my neighborhood with these barriers, like you can't walk here with these stupid barriers in the middle of the road. Like, and then you go into the pubs and they have like plastic shields, and then they say, the whole bit where you have to put on a mask to walk in, but then when you sit down to eat, it's okay.
Take it off. Yes.
And I'm going like, how can people be this mind numbed to accept all this? And it just forced me, like, bam, to relook at it. And then I turned it on myself and I said, wait, but you're not actually intellectually consistent, because when it comes to things like 9/11, you always dismiss that. I had that little voice going. So I think I saw that Loose Change, the Dylan, whatever his name is, this guy that did this great documentary, Loose Change, and there are a bunch of others, moon landing ones. And when I watched them, it was not only a revelation because of the subject matter, new information, but it was also a revelation because I thought, comparing to my previous state of mind, I was saying, oh, these guys must be idiots, saying, spewing crazy things. But then when I actually listened to them, they were very cogent, well done. They raised a number of very good points to investigate, as I hope we can do here. And I was like, I can't dismiss all this stuff. I have to look into it. Or if I do dismiss it, then I'm going to make myself even dumber. Because if I was like, who's brainwashed? The people who go into looking at this stuff, and are they being seduced and fooled and tricked into, all this kooky nonsense, that they're so mentally lazy that they just accept it all uncritically? Or was that done to us earlier when we were little and we were told all this stuff, and we just accepted it? And now from that vantage point, when someone contradicts it, it looks crazy. So it's like, which way is upside down?
Yeah. I think that's one of the beauties of fiction that people obviously don't seem to be getting here. Is I'm sure you've seen a lot of movies or watched or read some comics and things where the character, thinks he knows what things are, and then he gets something happens to him, and so his reality shifts, and it's always uncomfortable for the character. It's never comfortable. It's always really uncomfortable, and people will watch that and they'll go, "Yeah, what a great movie that was." Remember when his mind was blown? But then when that uncomfort comes to them about an idea that they think, not even simply like, I called your mother so-and-so. It's like, just an idea of the universe. How could it possibly hurt anybody for me to even say something like, yeah, the moon is made completely of cheese. Okay. I say that statement. Either you look at it as a ridiculous statement and it has no emotional effect upon you whatsoever, or you have a visceral emotional response to it. I think those are the most interesting, when people have visceral emotional responses and they don't think that that's not an indicator of anything. That emotional response you have is an indicator of oftentimes you having a preconceived notion that in reality you can't back up logically. So you get angry that you heard something that maybe made what your perception of the world was not quite as rock solid as you thought it was. But maybe I'm just repeating your point there.
No, that's great. I mean, that's exactly, it needs to be constantly reiterated that, people are programmed in ways they don't understand. And I've tweeted things about this on my X account. The mind control is not what people think it is. And this is just me saying this. I mean, I'm not an expert, so-called whatever that is. But I came to realize it's like that insight. It's like they paint these caricature pictures over here of all these things, so that the reality people miss. And it's hiding in plain sight because they've been blinded to it by false concepts. So, things like evil, right? So you get these caricatured evil villains in movies that are easily spottable. But then real evil in the real world is much more sly, and it comes with a smile, scammery.
It's usually very attractive.
And it's very attractive. And people just glide by it, and they don't recognize it because they're looking for the caricature. So that's mind control. And even the idea of mind control itself has been mind controlled, because they show you movies like The Manchurian Candidate, John Frankenheimer, which is a great movie. It's very entertaining, but it shows you these very lurid pictures of people, which I'm sure is actually still a real thing, right? But what they're doing is they're showing you one part of this entire big spectrum of mind control. So they're showing you that if this MK Ultra stuff is real, and feel fairly sure it is, that they're just doing nasty things to people with torture and things to create split personalities and all that stuff, which is just completely horrible to do to a human being. But that's only one small part of it, probably, because meanwhile we have this whole media constantly putting ideas in people's heads. We have the educational government-run schools putting ideas in little kids' heads that everybody repeats, and the culture enforcing it in all kinds of ways that people don't acknowledge, So that is a kind of mind control. And when it comes to things like what we're talking about here, level playing world, moon landings, you're going to talk about giants. People you can see the mind control, as you alluded to, when people react emotionally. You right away should know. It should be a red flag. And this is what I came to realize about myself, because I don't claim any better status, Patrick. It's like, I know that I used to be this way and do all these things. I used to get emotionally connected to politics, to different topics like this. I used to mock, even internally. I didn't always do it publicly, but even internally, oh, that's idiotic, And like what I'm going to show over here, which I'll just click on, when people comes to this so-called flat Earth stuff, the very first thing people always encounter is this, because that's been put out there. And so the people think that flat Earth is this completely idiotic pie-shaped world floating in space, and they go, "Where's the edge, bro? You're gonna fall off."
Well, that goes back into what you were saying earlier about mind control. Isn't like they've mind controlled the concept of what mind control is.
Yes,
And so part of mind control is setting up that expectation that obviously will never be fulfilled, so that it looks ridiculous when, because they're what they're trying to say is, if you say, Paul, that the Earth is not a globe, they go, "Oh, well, then it looks like this, huh? How
yeah,
stupid is this?"
exactly.
And it's like, well, okay, but that I didn't say it looked like that. I just said it wasn't this.
Exactly. You're backing at what the thing is that people always say, they go, "Well, if it's not that, then show me exactly what it really is,"
Right.
and that's not the idea. The idea is, if you back out of a lie, you don't have to have a ready-made, completely perfect alternate explanation. You can just go, "That's not real." And I'll get into that in a minute with my Suez Canal, presentation or business
Yeah.
here. But what this happened to me too with the level plane, flat Earth concept, is that after, as I said, I looked at 9/11 and moon landings, and I realized, well, this is like these things. And I had a hard time because, like everybody else, for example, with moon landings, I was a little kid, 69. I was 10 years old. They wheeled out the monitors, and then the later ones in middle school in the 70s, we all had to stop and watch them on the TV. I believed all that stuff. It was very hard to accept. But then when I listened to all the evidence, I was like, there's no way this can be real.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same with this, that when that got me going on these things, as you know, they connect and you go on to the next one and the next one.
Right.
So when I
Right.
eventually got to this one, level playing world, what happened actually was, it's interesting. And it's my trigger moment is, I had been looking into a lot of these things and trying, sift through them. And I'm not a person who will accept anything instantly. So I'm like watching different videos going, yeah, but I hadn't been watching videos on this topic. And it was during the lockdowns, or just as they were ending, I went to a summer garden party. It was like a freedom group up here in Toronto. It was up north of Toronto. So I go up there and it's a beautiful summer day. And I'm out there drinking some beers and talking to different people. And there's a guy who was a musician, a really good musician, this guy Cam. I haven't kept in touch with him, but a younger guy like your age group. And we were talking about different things, but then somehow this came up. I forget how that part, but what I don't forget is that I think I referred to a globe thing, and he looked at me. He just looked at me. He said, "Dude, like the Earth's not a globe; it's flat." And he said it with such conviction, and I was so shocked. I was like, I drove home later, and I was like, okay, this. It was again because he induced this cognitive dissonance in me, because I was at this grouping of people who are fairly, so-called conspiracy friendly and freedom oriented. But then I realized that I hadn't looked into that, and that I was shocked. I was having that emotional reaction. So what I did then with that was, having learned, I started studying it, which is what everybody does,
Right.
trying to disprove it, as people like David Weiss, who has the channel DITRH on YouTube, and Eric Dubay being the notorious people who have, Eric Dubay particularly, in 2015, I think he launched this all into the world. And but anyway, they say that that's a very common thing. It's like you set out to disprove it because you have an emotional reaction. You go, that's not true. I'm going to prove that we're on a spinning ball with water curving around, glued by gravity and I'm just going to go and prove it. So that's exactly what I did. I went home, I started watching all these different videos. I was like, I finally came to realize what I think is much more accurate. And I don't have 100% conclusions about all of it, because that's arrogance. But this one we're showing here on the screen was the first thing I came across, which is programmed by the algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad we can get this in, is because if you go and Google it, you'll hit this, and this is what I hit. And then I hit that documentary on Netflix. I forget the name of it, but there's a notorious documentary on Netflix about people going to flat Earth conventions and investigating. And it's kind of, in the end, a clever, sly way to laugh at people, because it pushes them all into this weird little bubble of, yeah, these bros believe that the Earth is a flat disc, amongst space with all the other round planets.
And I'm sure that they choose the most attractive and presentable people who have the flat Earth opinion to present it. I'm sure that's me being sarcastic. They when they want to make points, they choose
Exactly.
groups of people. And I'm not going to be mean towards anybody the way they look or whatever like that. Everybody's different, you know. But like they will always choose the people who you can say that guy's ridiculous. You know, what a weirdo that guy is.
Yeah.
But,
So I mean, I hit this, and it stopped me for probably about another year. I can't remember. But then, fortunately, I saw some other videos from other people. There's a British guy called something Dave. I can't remember his name, but
something.
He's got a moniker.
Oh, yeah, I know him.
something. And I started watching some of his videos, but eventually, because they all connect through these algorithms, I did manage to find more interesting people like this David Weiss, who has the channel, like I said, DITRH. And so eventually it got to the more plausible, instead of this, and let me just click on my, there's not this, it's not this, okay? So and in fact, what you need is the different pieces, which sort of segues me into presenting like this is called the Gleason map. And it's a map that was very common in the world, I'm told, by watching these channels. And for example, you can still find it in the United Nations logo. There's photos that people present that show that even in the earlier versions of Air Force One, in the background of John F. Kennedy's Air Force One, this map was on the wall. And so the globe people will explain this away and say, well, that's just a reprojection of the globe flattened out, right? Yeah. But in fact, this concords much more so with centuries or hundreds of years worth of earlier maps, which I'll show in a second, as people can probably see on that sidebar. But if you go here, this is and I'll go into a bit of this for a second. I'll try and get it bigger. Like this explained to me, and we're really just skipping over. There's so much to. Hi there, Transylvanian.
Hello to both Catalyst Vault and Transylvanian Jack.
Yeah,
I forgot to say
thanks
hello
to
Catalyst
everybody
Vault
who's jumping in here.
Yeah. What's up, guys?
Let me just what I'll do is I'll try and explain this, and I'm trying to do it in a bit of an anecdotal way. But you see over here, I have a little vision problem, so I'm trying to see this clearly. But that's the British. If people can see my arrow,
we cannot see your cursor, unfortunately.
Yeah, you can see it. Yeah,
we cannot.
Oh, you cannot. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, if you look just to the right of the central black dot is, of course, the North Pole, which is there's nothing shown there, right?
Right.
And this isn't directly flat Earth, but they're all sort of connected. So I'm going to, if you bear with me, I'm going to just kind of loop around this. And hopefully it's interesting to the people who've never heard this stuff before. So if you look down if you know where the Great Lakes are, I'm in Toronto. And I always wondered when I used to take flights to Europe and to England in particular, which is just over to the right from that black dot, the British Isles. I always wondered why there were several flights, and one in particular I remember in my 20s when we were going across, and the pilot came on and he goes, you look out your left window, you'll see the tip of Greenland over there on your left. And Greenland is that big yellow chunk right near the black center of the North Pole. And I'm like, why are we going over Greenland if you... And I only barely twigged on it as a youth, but now when I've watched a lot of these videos, it makes 100% sense. I'll see if I can get this close enough to the camera to show.
Let me make you big here real quick.
Okay, just for a moment. Yeah.
There we go.
So I'm here, and I'm going over to, let me do this properly, to Britain here. Okay, so if you go across the curve of the globe, you're going to go here, right? But even when you're at the midpoint here, you're so far away from Greenland, you're not going to see Greenland.
Right.
You're not going to see the tip of Greenland here. Okay. So I'd be going like, why on earth are we looping up over, and we were going right near it. Why are we going near Greenland up here when we're going straight across this surface to the British Isles, which would be the shortest route? You don't want to waste money in a jet, right? So if we go back to the map, when you see it's too bad my cursor is not showing up, but you draw a straight line for the Great Lakes where Toronto is here, the British Isles. It's just a straight line. And there are many flat Earth videos, so-called flat Earth level plane. if you really dig into this, and we can only skip over it in a presentation like this because I'm going to say a bunch of stuff, and Patrick's going to do his presentation about giants, or whatever he has to say about giants, which is a subject I don't know as much about. But anyway, you see the point here is that there are things like this, and people have done extensive videos about light routes. When you look into them, just as I intuited, even as a younger guy, like, that doesn't make sense, but I kind of just dismissed it. No reason for latitude and longitude lines on a flat Earth map. Well, they explained that. I'll go back to this and zoom out. I think that actually, if you can indulge me for another minute or two here, Patrick.
Yeah. No, you do. I need to go to the bathroom real quick. Okay. I'm sorry. I'll be right back.
That's okay. I'll do it later. So what I find that is lacking often in presentations where people talk about this stuff is they don't give people the basics. Because if you say to people, well, there's not a globe, a spinning ball like this guy, and it's not this, as we're told, tilted at 23 degrees, 23 and whatever half degrees, flying through space. Well, then what is it? So people in the so-called flat Earth community have arguments, or not arguments, but differences of opinion about what exactly it is. But they basically settle on the idea of this, that it's a flat circle. The oceans are like a lake in a sense. They're all connected in this sense, these oceans. And that Antarctica, which you see in this map, the red is just nothing. It's just a map element. But the white just inside that red circle, outer circle, would be Antarctica, which is a continuous outer ring that's higher. And Antarctica is apparently listed as the highest continent in the world. So it's like the encircling sort of walls holding in this lake of the oceans. And within that, you have the different continents and islands and so on, which are raised up above the flat surface of the ocean. And then the next thing, and some people say there's a dome or firmament of some kind, which is mentioned in the Bible. And it's clearly mentioned in the Bible, the dome of the firmament, which we could even jump over to that at some point. And if I read you even the very first bits of Genesis, the Bible describes it 100% clearly, which is another whole thing you can get into, that you can have a religious awakening when you realize, wait, the Bible is not all metaphorical. Maybe some of the parables are. Well, some of it, like Genesis, is strictly literal, and it's describing God, God or the people who wrote the Bible with the Holy Spirit or whatever it would be. The Arctic Circle would be the inner. It's one of these inner circles. I wish my cursor would show up.
It actually is there right now for some reason.
Oh, okay.
Look at that. I guess when you zoomed out, it's there.
Yeah. I can't see because like I said, my vision not great, and I'm wearing a contact lens here, so I can't see that.
You gotta make your cursor a little bit bigger in your settings.
Yes, I should, but maybe I won't do that right now. But the Arctic Circle, like, the idea is that the every way towards the center is north on a flat Earth, and you have the black. What's here in the black dot, and I'll get into that in a second. That's the North Pole. But the people, if you want more conspiracy, the people that have extensive videos, and I really strongly urge people who, this is just like a taste of this stuff, because there's hours and hours of it you can watch that elaborates in more full detail. But the idea is that our maps are not accurate. This map is more accurate, but even it doesn't show the central part of the
Antarctica would be the southern.
It's the white circle around, and that's why they say Captain Cook went for like 69,000 miles, which is impossible on a globe Earth. He just kept going around, and what he was doing was circumnavigating the entire, going around this containment, thinking he was circling a continent, but he wasn't circling a continent like this at the bottom of the globe down here. He was going around this outer containing wall. Sorry, Patrick, I put it back. The Antarctica is this encircling ring that's higher, that's holding in the oceans. And there is even in many places of it, apparently a cliff wall, a cliff edge. So it's higher than the oceans. The oceans are like a lake. And the other part of the sort of map setup, like while you were away, Patrick, I was saying that the flaw in many presentations is they don't give people the basics of how this alternate world would work. But as it says in the Bible, God says, I created two great lights, one to illuminate the day and one the night. So what those are is the sun and the moon.
Mhm.
They're local, they're smaller. We don't know how big, but they're not like off in infinite space. Because in fact, the Bible doesn't talk about space. There's no space.
Mhm.
There's no space the way we think of it, which in one fell swoop eliminates aliens, it eliminates the Big Bang, evolution, all that crap, gravity. It's all BS. And no, I can't prove that. And no, I wouldn't argue with people about it, but that's
Well,
what I
let me push back on you there.
did.
This is our first pushback here.
Okay.
You said it eliminates aliens. I would
Yeah.
say
Well, that explanation for them.
yeah, the conventional, like, yeah, circular, spherical planets with,
Well, they come
yeah.
from deep space somewhere, some other galaxy or something.
But there could be other people on other areas like our own, planes with, you know what I'm saying? Like controlled planetary environments. There could be other people somewhere else.
I agree. Well, okay, yes, and that is where in the community of these people that study this stuff much more intensively than me. I'm just a student of the students, but it does resonate with me much more. Like I said, in terms of backing out of all this globe stuff. There's people who have those other maps. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen them, Patrick. That this is not the only conception of the world. There may, in fact, be a containment dome over this section, but there may be other ponds that spread out. There may be other land we really don't know, or it could be, if it is a globe, it could be immensely bigger than we're told. I'm not prone to that as much as thinking that it's probably either just this the way it is, or it's maybe a few other ponds, and that may be plausible to me. But you were going to say something. I don't want to monopolize.
No, you're okay. I was just going to say, what I would say is my understanding of it is, because I haven't really decided, I guess, either way on the whole flat Earth, globe Earth kind of thing.
Okay.
Because I guess generally speaking, I operate more like operationally. So for me, I'm like, what's the great secret that that's preventing humanity from doing better? You know what I mean? And so for me, it's like, let me back up. See, I get so on tangents and stuff.
That's okay.
I used to think it was all aliens from different planets, right?
Yeah.
Like NASA fan fiction, essentially.
Yes.
Now, after having studied not just the Bible, but like other religions and what they have said about history as it stands,
yes,
it is very clear to me that the phenomenon that we deal with on this planet when we talk about UFOs or spirit beings or whatever, all that stuff is predominantly like strictly to this planet. It certainly originates not from this planet, because I'm one of those people who thinks the watchers, the angels essentially, are what is like the defining factor in what has caused the planet to be the way that it is. So I don't think it's all aliens though. So I was kind of being like a devil's advocate there by saying, well, there could be people on other planets. I think there could be people on other planes of existence, planets, whatever you want to call them. But I think maybe we agree in that I think the weird stuff that goes on our planet is predominantly just specific to our planet.
Yeah. Do I think that there are unexplained things? Definitely. There's lots of them. Do I think that there's also fake things that are put here by humans that are evil? That I also think that like this famous Project Bluebeam.
Yeah.
Just things seeded in the media, earlier CG before it was announced, AI before it was revealed was probably.
I thought you were going to say Comicsgate. Early CG.
No, CGI.
Right.
Yeah, I said it wrong. So I think that probably and an alternate history, fake history. So it's a very confusing jumble of stuff to sort out, which is, why people don't go into it, which is understandable. And it's why it's very hard to be completely definitive. So I'm not, like I said, it's kind of becomes arrogance if you say, well, I know exactly this. That's the whole problem that's been put on us with the earlier stuff, is that people are locked and cemented emotionally into believing all the stuff they're told as a little kid. It's like the kindergarten teacher wouldn't lie to me and tell me that Australia is upside down and that they're all being glued there, Right. So I don't, I don't have 100% firm thing other than to say, I guess I use the word resonance, because, and that's why I don't argue with people. I'm not going to get into an argument with you about this. It's like, but to me, this is much more plausible for reasons that I stated, like my flight route from Toronto to London, UK. It's like that explains it a lot better. And there are dozens and dozens, hundreds of others of things like this that when you really delve into this subject, and I'll get into the Suez Canal maybe in a minute, just so that this doesn't get super long. But even just to finish about the structure, the thing to realize is that, not everything can go with everything. That's why that pie-shaped Earth floating in space is just ridiculous. Because what they did is they mixed different paradigms, like space and this thing, and they just mixed them in a schmoz.
Right.
And you can't do that. And that's intentionally done.
Yeah.
It's
funny how they say that, right? They're like, your concept of the flat plane is bullshit, because if you were to put it in space like this, it wouldn't operate within gravitation. It's like, wait a minute. You're already deciding certain rules that apply to this version of what you think I think. And so, it's already, it's like yeah.
So if people were to calm down, Patrick, and just listen carefully, they don't have to accept it.
Yeah.
Just listen carefully. They like, this is what I'm trying to do here, is go, as far as I understand it, and I don't claim to have grasped this completely, but it's like there's this flat plane that we're on. The sun and the moon are moving. We're not moving around them. Everything's been inverted. If you remember the principle of inversion, everything's inverted. It's really satanic. So everything's been inverted. So they say the sun's moving, or so the sun's still and we're moving. And that's why, the sun appears to set. It's actually the reverse. The sun is local, smaller, and it's moving in a circle. So when it moves out, so for people in the northern hemisphere, which it's not a hemisphere because we're not on a sphere. See, I still use the terminology. The people on the innermost part of the circle, like where I am in Canada on this map, the pink country there, which is probably a good color for it, pinkos.
Nice.
Bada boom. We're moving into our winter. So what you have is, and this is not a visual, like animated presentation, but if there was one, imagine the sun is going in a circle every 24 hours around this world. And in the winter, what it does is it slowly spirals out further out towards the edge, which becomes the summer for people in places like Australia, which, as you can see, are further out near the edge. So what it does is it moves slowly through the year into a circle out to the limit, and then it spirals in its circular motion. It spirals back in closer when it becomes like June again, whatever the summer solstice. It's much closer, and of course, naturally, it would have to be moving slower in the summer because it's doing a smaller circle. So to still maintain 24 hours, it's going slower. But as it goes out in the winter to the further, bigger circle, it's moving much faster, which is why the sun sets much more quickly in the winter relative to here, like where I am in Canada. And the sun is, I can see that from my apartment. And it explained to me what I could never understand. Why is the sun lower in its angle in the sky? Well, it's because from my vantage point there in Canada, as it's moved out to a much more distant circle, it's lower in the sky because it's not as much overhead. It's on a lower angle. So, and the same with the moon, although the moon is apparently controlling the months. The moon has a different, the sun is the days and the moon is the months. It's on a different, slightly different phase, but they're basically alternating, but on a slightly staggered thing. And there's people like this David Weiss on his DITR channel who can explain all this stuff in exquisite detail. But that's the basic sketch for people who go, like, how could all that possibly work? And let me jump ahead, actually, while I scroll my side, but that connects what I just said there to something that I explained that I always wondered about here, is that people talk about crepuscular rays. Okay, so I've been on many walks, as everyone has, in my beaches neighborhood here, and I see sometimes the sun coming through the clouds, like in the lower left one. You see the sun rays coming like this.
Yeah.
And when you activate your mind, you go, wait, right. Why are they converging?
It's funny. I didn't even consider that till you said it. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. That's not right.
It's pointing exactly to where the light source is. It's not that far away. Look, they should be. Someone made this. I grabbed this off X. That's how the rays should look if it was really 93 million miles away. They should all be parallel because they're effectively parallel. with maybe like the tiniest bit of conversions, if the frickin' sun is 93 million
Right.
miles, that's just logic. It's like
Right.
basic geometry. You can't really argue
Wow.
with it.
That's
Okay.
crazy. I'd never considered such a thing. That's actually
Okay.
wild
So,
to think
and
about.
when do we get to the Suez Canal? So it's like, sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing here. So then you can walk by. This talks about mental blindness, to which I attribute to myself too. So I don't want people who watch this later to go, "Oh, this guy thinks he's so great." It's like I walked through my whole life looking at this stuff, but because I've been told this one thing earlier, it's like a mental block. It's like a mask. So it blocks your mind from perceiving what's right there in front of you. And it never. When I finally saw this in one of the videos, and then I see these memes and things, I was like, why did I never see that once and realize what it meant? And I know perspective and geometry. I use it in drawing all the time, but I still was clouded and couldn't fit. But then when you open yourself a little bit to go, what's the actual truth? And like you said, Patrick, is like, Holy Spirit, give me some insight into accepting even my own flaws of not being blind, being blind. And it's like your ego has to take a big hit.
Mm-hmm.
When you get past that hurdle, you go, oh, there's no way it can be 93 million miles away, because the rays would not converge like that. It's really basic stuff. The only way they would appear to, because of perspective, to converge like that is at noon. If you were the sun is directly above you, and you look up straight up, and like this, the rays are like above you in like being inside a conical tent, right? But
Mm-hmm.
when the rays are all way over in the distance, and they're coming down through the clouds, like in these photos, there's no way, because of geometry and perspective, that they should be converging in an angle in a pyramid. They should be parallel. So that was one really strong thing. I don't know if you want to do my Suez Canal thing, but I'll do that. That'd probably take about 10 minutes. Should I do that next? Like,
What I would say is, I think, like I said in the beginning of the stream, we're going to take wherever the conversation leads us. And I feel
yeah.
like the conversation has led us to level plane / flat earth, whatever we want to call it, for tonight. The Giants thing, look, I can talk about that. And in fact, I do want to give, if anybody's in the chat right now, there is a large, like a plethora of things about Giants I can talk about. So I'm going to post in the chat. While Paul is talking about the Suez Canal, I'm going to post 4 different jumping off points, because there's a million of them.
Yeah,
I'll
and
let you guys decide where you want me to jump off next time we do this for the Giants.
Because I'd be happy to come on another stream if you want to do that.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to go super long. But no, I mean, yeah, because as I said to you privately, I'm very interested in Giants. I think I know a little bit about it, but it's just one of those ones it's on my list of things to go into. I 100% believe that a lot of that history was obscured.
Yeah.
And so I'd be glad to more come on and just kind of listen and be a student. But going back to this, whoops, I'm clicking on the wrong thing again here. I was clicking on the presentation. So if you go to this, and again, this is just a tidbit or a taste. This is the Mercator, I think it's called the Mercator World Map. Yeah, I got this from Wikipedia. And these are earlier maps of the world. Now, of course, everybody—
What is that map called? Sorry.
Mercator. And they even now use, I think some of, the globes like I have is called a Mercator projection. Like they mapped it onto I don't know authoritatively how to describe it, but it's called Mercator, Mercator.
Mm-hmm.
And there are earlier versions of this map, of the world map, that this man Mercator did. Now, again, not posing myself as a complete authority. I can't quote chapter and verse exactly the whole history of this guy, but the point being that there are many earlier maps of the world that show some very interesting and puzzling things that are really mind-bending and interesting. So this is just first an overview. And you can see that there are a lot of different placements of things that are very odd and different, but it generally still conforms to like North America, South America, Europe. And I guess this is like the front and back. Now, I guess this is considered a flat Earth map. I'm not sure, but the main thing to look at is what we're going to get into the next bit, which is, I'll just click on it, is when you go to what's considered to be the North Pole, there's parts that fill in what was missing. And
What
so,
is this? What is this here? This
okay, so
is-
what you have here is if you look in the slightly lower left, that's Greenland and Iceland. And you have, let me see if I can see with my, on the upper right, it says Asia. And it's a bit, if I click back on my other map, it's a bit rotated from this one. So that's a bit confusing, but like on this one, if you look close, I'll zoom it in more a bit. One sec, just to compare. So you see Greenland there.
Yeah.
So then when we go to this other one, oops, I clicked, keep doofus. Okay. See, it's rotated clockwise a little bit. So now Greenland is just below the middle. But what you have is 4 pieces of land that are not shown on the main maps. And moreover, as I click into it, this is another version of the same thing, kind of closer. Have a look at what's
I'm
in
blow
the,
this up here.
huh? Yeah,
I'm gonna
here,
blow this
I can
up.
do it. You see, in the center, there's a giant rock. At the North Pole. And there's supposed to be, if you look into the flat Earth videos, there's something called Mount Meru, the magnetic rock, giant land at the center. And I'm not sure if some people have said this in videos, and this is where I'm on not 100% certain ground. Some people have said that it may have been these lands may have been the original place where there was the Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, if I read you which I might do a section of it, in Genesis 2, it talks about 4 rivers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about while I'm looking at this. Like,
yeah,
oh shit.
Okay, hang on. I'll click to that, Patrick, because I've got it on another. Oh, wait a second. No, that's my little notes that I might read. Suez diagram, and I've got a Suez diagram here. I'll present in a second. Just bear with me. I didn't. I don't have it here. Oh, I know. I've got it in another tab. How do I do that? In Genesis. If I present you another tab, will that?
Yeah, if you will have to move off of this one, but it'll bring it up.
Okay, StreamYard. Oh, I know. Okay.
But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I hope the folks at home do as well.
Okay, just bear with me, people. I'll present screen. Do I have to stop screen first? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
So present, I'll go back to that in a second because it's actually share screen. Bear with me.
That picture right there made me think about the Sumerian cuneiform as well. So we'll get into that at some point. But
okay, sure. I mean, because we're both on the same wavelength. There's so many cross connections here.
Yes.
Go to Genesis 2. I'll jump forward here.
Can you blow that up a little bit bigger so people can
absolutely.
see it and read it a bit better? There you go. That's much better.
Okay, Adam and Eve. I'll read from the top. People can read, but let's go through it. It's not long. Thus, the heavens and the earth were completed in their vast array. I mean, it's really beautiful when you see that this is truth, at least to me. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he'd been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested. Okay, I'll skip over that. Adam and Eve. This is the account of the heavens and earth when they were created, when the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Now, no shrub had yet appeared in the earth, and no plant had yet sprung up. And he sent rain. I'm kind of skipping over. Man became a living being. So it's about how we were formed out of the dust. We were created beings. Now the Lord God had planted a garden in the east in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed. The Lord God made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground. We have to get into that. But in 10 here, part 10, it says, a river watering the garden flowed from Eden. From there it was separated into 4 headwaters. I don't claim to have come across this. I saw this in some videos, but it's always stuck with me. The name of the first is the Pishon. It winds through the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is good. Aromatic resin and onyx are also there. The name of the second river is the Gihon. It winds through the entire land of Cush. The name of the third river is the Tigris or Tigris. It runs along the east side of Ashur. And the fourth river is the Euphrates. Now, of course, naturally, I'm thinking, isn't the Euphrates in the Middle East? Mm-hmm. And is that renaming that has happened? You see, so.
Well, it's like the same. Like, there's many things throughout all of history that have been renamed to be named after old things. So maybe that's what the Euphrates was in our, ancient but more modern than this time.
Yes. But let me stop the screen and go back to my other.
Sure.
I'll go back to my other presentation because that's kind of like going to, there we go. Have you got that? Or do I have to do?
There we go.
Perfect. So, but all these things, and there's lots more of them, as you would know, Patrick, is that they point you relentlessly back to, because I didn't even talk about Genesis 1 there. Well, catalysts, there are always objections, and this is where the whole thing becomes about arguing. And I'm not saying you're arguing. I'm just saying that.
Well, pushing back is always a good thing.
Yeah, it's good, but the whole thing is that where it relentlessly, at least for me, pointed to is that conclusions, like basically not conclusions about exactly knowing, but conclusions about saying, I can conclude long ago that I'm being lied to, that it's either purposely confused or unintentionally, but that it's all muddled and that I don't have the real goods on what this real world is. So that points towards investigation. And again, like when I saw this and I saw people present this about the magnetic North Pole, that there's lands there, that there's these rivers. Some of the videos have said that there used to be these pygmies that you see in mythology and strange creatures. Then you get to things like what I'll show next year, which is this, the world tree from the Norse. I think it's the Norse.
Yeah, Norse mythology. Yeah,
Marja, but it's not wanting to.
It's fine. It looks good.
Okay, so this is apparently the Yggdrasil, the North, the tree, the giant tree. Okay, that'll get us into giants, Patrick. The giant tree at the North Pole. And if you look at this, you go, wait a minute, because there's like a giant mountain, but there's a giant tree growing out of it, going up to the heavens where, like the containment dome, there's other giant trees at the side. There's ice mountains around the edge. Well, there you've got your Antarctica.
Catalyst says, so this is Tigris and the one that circle Gion. Gion is an area in the Middle East also. No, he's still talking about the rivers, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I admit I don't know that, and that's very interesting. And
well, all we were trying to say, Catalyst, in regards to that is that sometimes old names are then applied to new things. Right. So it is conceivable that they mentioned the Euphrates in the Bible, and that the Euphrates name for the river has now been utilized for something else, as happens throughout all of history. Like we've got fighter planes and things that are named after Greek gods and stuff. So it's like names get reused. So that we can't say as a matter of course that because we know the Euphrates is in that area that it's not this. You know what I mean? That's
because it doesn't mean that it's always been that way, because streets get renamed all the time, right? Like they relabel things.
Well, that's part of language. Like language is it one of the least real things about being a human, because the moment that your current definition for that particular guttural noise is no longer that, it's over now. Now it means something else, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Which strikes you as a little kid, how arbitrary names for things are. Like
yes.
And then, as a little kid, you'll repeat a word to yourself over and over until it makes no sense, because you're like, it's just a sound. But I mean, I just find all these things that have been presented in, as I said, the videos I've been watching, the good ones, the intelligent ones, not the idiotic ones. Like if you go to flatearthsociety.com, that whole group, apparently it's filled with misinformation, and you can learn all this stuff if you dig into the topic. But some of those videos have presented things like this, like older world maps that were previously you would dismiss as going, oh, those were just a bunch of ignorant savages hundreds of years ago. They had no idea. They had no idea of mapping and this and that, and they just made dumb things, and we're all smart now. But you look at these things, they're very intriguing. Like look at the support pillars. Look at the fact that there's an underworld. There's snakes down below that tree at the base of it. There's a tree of life above that's green and blooming, but down below there's these different channels. There's a port. There's a gate. There's a gateway. There's some kind of I don't know what this all signifies. I'd love to know more about this. There's a channel going from the top of that magnetic mountain in the north,
right?
That's leading you down, that you can get cast out, I guess, of heaven and put in. Is that hell? Is that the
underworld? Some Hades or something,
Exactly. So it's very, very interesting. And I guess now I'll go into, unless there's more about that, but I'll just mention about the Suez. Well, two things that here. I clicked on these because Miyazaki, who I love.
I was about to say that looks very Miyazaki-ish. Yeah,
it's Miyazaki. It's one of the outtakes from Castle in the Sky. And you go like, why does he always have giant trees in his movies?
Oh my God. I know exactly what you're saying when you say like, oh my gosh, the giant trees like iconography from him
Yeah,
is the most like I don't know. There's something about it. It just stirs my soul. It makes me like,
exactly. Exactly.
whoa.
It always had that effect on me too, Patrick. And it's like a resonance. I call it resonance. Anytime these things are happening,
What's up,
they're like,
Wilberforce Booster? We're talking about all kinds of crazy stuff.
and
Welcome.
then don't, guys, don't get me started talking about Planet of the Apes. Remember Planet of the Apes, the original one, 1968? It's an exact map. I was thinking about this when thinking about this presentation and thinking about how many tangents there are. Okay. So I watched that as a kid, but when you go into Planet of the Apes, the entire movie plot. Now, I'm not claiming necessarily that Rod Serling and the other writers, there was a guy called Michael Wilson that wrote the screenplay, and I forget who else. I'm not saying that they intentionally put all that into the movie Planet of the Apes, but there's a lot of incredible stuff. Like, for example, talk about mind control. They show, like, if you remember that movie, the original one, which I love, it blew me away as a kid. So in the Taylor character in Planet of the Apes, Charlton Heston, the apes, Zira and Cornelius, that are the ones who are like the conspiracy theorists of that movie, because they're two, I guess, chimps that are open to his so-called wacky ideas. Because what that whole movie does is it presents a guy, the everyman, who is us, because we're like following that character, who is in an upside down world, and it's just like us, that the way we're presenting this stuff against an audience of people who will largely go, "Oh, you're crazy." So for Charlton Heston, he goes, "It's a madhouse," because he's in this world where everything's upside down. The apes are humans and the humans are apes. His buddies are subject to vivisection. They're cut open and stuffed as in the so-called science museum. He's put on trial where you have the see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil monkeys. There's a famous pose that's shown where the ape's on trial. He makes a paper airplane showing like science and flight, and they crumple it up and toss it away. Then he decides to go on a mission to prove that he's not crazy, but he has to cross through the forbidden zone, which is when he's on his horse. There's like a wall of fire. I forget if that's in the first movie or the second movie. I think it's in both movies. But there's these scarecrows and skeletons that are scaring him off. And it says that, and they go, the Dr. Zira, or no, what's the other guy? The Paul Williams character, whoever that is. Was it Paul Williams in the first movie? I forget. But, the guy in the orange, the orangutan, he's like, do not go there, Taylor, and you won't like what you find. But he goes anyway. And there's like a wall of fake fire that scares him off. But he goes through it. And he goes into this land where he has the final things where he discovers the Statue of Liberty. The point of all this is, isn't that showing cognitive dissonance? He has to go through the fears and into reality. And he discovers the truth that, you've got the heliocentric Statue of Liberty with the sun spikes, maybe Freemasons, all that stuff. There's a whole connection to that.
No, we can't get started on the Freemasons tonight.
But there's he discovers that at the end of the movie, and he discovers that the whole time he's been on Earth, but a different version of Earth, and he's been lied to. So to me, there's a whole parallel, like, meta thing about Planet of the Apes. That's not only a great, amazing adventure, but when you go into this, you realize it's almost like a metaphor for discovering truth and the battles that you're going to have internally in yourself and externally in society if you try and wade into the forbidden zone. So that was a bit of a segue, but let me see if I can blow this up. These are memes I got off X, but they're circulating around. Surveyors, engineers, and architects never factor in the supposed curvature of the Earth into their projects. So this is all verifiable fact. This is not a flat earther saying this. Like, you can go on any accepted source. And some of them actually say the Suez Canal, I guess it depends on where you measure it, but some of them say 120 miles. But anyway, the Suez Canal is 100 miles long with zero curvature. If Earth was a ball, there should be a 6,669-foot drop from one end of the canal to the other. But the canal has no locks because the terrain through which it passes is flat. And I'll skip ahead here to a little drawing I did here. In an attempt to explain this to people geometrically, because If you just go into these things in words and you don't think visually, you won't even grasp the argument, let alone make a conclusion.
Uh-huh.
So what I've tried to draw here, can you see my cursor, Patrick? Like,
No. Can you back up a little bit from the? Oh wait, there it is.
oh,
It's very small. I can see it now. Now I've got it. All right.
okay, it's over the middle of this. Oh,
Right
yeah.
now, ladies and gentlemen. Right now, it's next to the word flat. It's to the
Okay.
left of the F there.
Yeah.
See
Okay,
it?
so that part in the middle where I put flat, that's just this is just a simple diagram. It's showing a sphere. If the world is a sphere, they admit that there's a 120-mile flat surface that's the Suez Canal. And in photos, time lapse, you can see it's just flat going. You can see boats, big tankers going down it. And they admit openly it's flat, 100, 120 miles of flat water. But then, in contradiction to that, they tell you the globe is a curved surface with oceans that bend.
Mm-hmm.
And, like you can't see it, but the boats go over the horizon and all this stuff, right? Water curves when it's on a big scale. They never tell you at what point, like we know that water won't stick to a small, if I got an orange and I put water on it, it's gonna all drip off, or a basketball or whatever. If I made a sphere as big as this house and I poured water on it and started it spinning, the water's still not going to stick on it like a foot of water. So they never explain that at what scale physics changes and the gravity will make it suddenly stick. But they'll say, oh, when it's big enough, gravity makes it stick and it spins around happily. But then they say, well, there's this flat part for 120 miles, which is really a significant length. It's not 10 feet. Mm-hmm. So you have to deal with the fact, which the Google explanations, when you get into that, if you go off and look at Google, which I'll explain maybe in a few minutes, it explains it away with a hand wave, but it doesn't really clear this up. At least not to my satisfaction.
Well, that's a Google response right there.
Yeah. No. So you get this fact that there's a flat surface. But what I tried to draw here for people visually is, if they built this, wouldn't you have to, out of the globe surface, because over that length of time, there's a calculation of curve you can do. It's 8 inches per mile squared. So you would get, at least at the midpoint, to my calculation, at least a couple of 1,000 feet high trench walls on either side if you carve through across this globe. And that's leaving out the problem that if you see where I marked A and B, those are like hinge points, because if you've got this flat area and then suddenly you go to the Mediterranean Sea and it starts curving again, how do you have an angle there where the water was flat for 120 miles and then it hits the curved Mediterranean Sea, or at the other end at B, the Red Sea, which it's connecting? It makes no sense. It's completely impossible.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, here I'll go to this other little snippet that I got from, maybe blow that up one more click if I can do it.
Just a little bit bigger, yeah. You
can
scroll down from there. Well, a little bit bigger and then scroll down.
Okay, hang on.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, this is from an account called the Archivist on X, and he's also got a YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. Actually, I haven't watched as many because you know how it is. There's like way too many to watch. But I'll just read this quickly. This is from some old newspaper, probably like the 1920s. I didn't record the date, but it's like old. There are countless people who sincerely believe that the Earth is flat. They are most numerous and vocal in America. This is like about probably over 100 years ago, but there's a whole thing, an argument about this that's now long been banished from thought. And because we all know, in quotes, that people are idiots who think about this stuff. We all know the Earth is a globe. But before that, there was a raging debate, apparently. So this is like a newspaper article when they were building. This is a newspaper article. This is really blow your mind.
I've been reading through it here. It's great. Let's go.
When they were building the Suez Canal, this newspaper article was there. They are the most numerous and vocal in America. In England, there are fewer who declare their belief, although there is an act of parliament that backs up the flat Earth brethren. Some of the English engineering firms who were invited to tender for the construction of the Suez Canal declined because they thought it would be impossible to hold up huge sandbanks on the Earth's curved surface, like I tried to show in my diagram. De Lesseps, the French engineer who finally did the job, assumed that the Earth was flat and conducted, I think they mean constructed the canal accordingly. In consequence of this, an act of parliament was passed, the Railways, Powers and Construction Amendment Act 1870, and has not since been repealed, forbidding any engineer invited to tender for the construction of railways and canals to make any allowance for the curvature of the Earth's surface. So they basically said, back then, they said, like, okay, we realized they built the damn thing. It's completely flat.
That's amazing. What does he, Catalyst? He says using the word curved to try to prove a flat Earth.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, because I guess the point Paul's trying to make with the Suez Canal is that in actuality it can't be curved. So what, Catalyst Vault, can you specify what you're trying to say there?
Yeah, maybe write another comment if you want to. Maybe make it a bit longer so we can understand, because you're not live with us. I'd be happy to talk
Yeah,
about it.
it's always harder to read chats and instead of somebody saying something in person. So
Yeah,
thank you, Catalyst Vault.
I'm saying that no, it's ridiculous. It's proving that it's not flat. When they build these things, they do not take into account curvature. They made a 120-mile long canal, or 100 miles, whatever it is, and they dug the darn thing, and they didn't like have to build trench walls, because you're cutting through. It's like, imagine slicing an orange, like I showed in my diagram. I'll show that again.
Yeah.
You'd have to take a slice out of it, and you'd have to deal with all that. You'd have to shore up the walls of these with giant
like those British engineers were having issues with. You would have giant, huge walls that you would need to shore up if you were going to make it flat like that.
Yeah.
So now, but this, I think we got to kind of maybe go here soon.
Sure, go. Yeah, I'm pretty much done. There's a little bit more, but that's the basic essence of it. Well, if that doesn't make you think, then I don't know.
Well, yeah. I wanted to kind of round off the conversation with a few things for the chat maybe to think about. And this isn't like Paul and Patrick telling you guys you're lesser than us and you need to think like we do. It's just like we're just trying to say, hey, maybe consider this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He says we're agreeing. I see. Okay. But for the chat other than Catalyst Vault, and especially people who watch this there later, there's a couple things I wanted to bring up in regards to this stuff, because this has kind of been like Paul's been able to talk about level plane. He's been able to give some good examples of alternative ideas. He's not making claims for what is the truth so much as he's saying this doesn't seem very likely.
It's more like what isn't
taken there.
I'm stuck on what isn't. That's good,
right?
To not know. We're always told you have to be the egghead and know everything. I'm saying I don't know. I'm saying, but what I do know, when I do know something, I know that that's not true. It's like I'm saying that enough of this stuff is proved to me that and I didn't even get into lots of other proofs about the world and gravity and there's a lot more we get if you want, or maybe
we will, but we just have to spread it out,
Yeah. I'm saying that I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. I backed out of this automatic belief.
Right. And that's kind of where I fall as well. Although there's some challenges I would like to make to people who are listening to this. If you're the kind of person who's listening to this and you're like, this is all bullshit. Okay. I'd like to make a challenge first to the Christians in the audience. The Christians in the audience, you have been convinced through rational empiricism over the past 300 years that your religion is based upon like nice feel-good myth, essentially. You have been convinced that the things that occurred in the Bible that are the basis for which you believe the things that you do, morally speaking, they didn't happen and they're not real. Which then begs the question, why do you believe in Christianity? If the things that were said in the Old Testament are not real, then that means then that the prophecies predicting Jesus Christ being the Messiah, yada, 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 are not real. So which implies then that your entire religion is complete and utter bullshit.
Patrick, just to interject, I completely agree with you. This exactly concords with what I've thought. And because I'm not an avid churchgoer person, and
sure,
in that sense, but I do believe the Bible is real, and this has only helped completely. Like because I've always wondered why in churches, and tell me if this is or isn't where you were going with that, because I don't want to throw you off but I always wonder, like, you read the Genesis, like Adam lived for 930 years. Like, who lives for that long? And then they're talking about there were giants then in days of old, the Nephilim and all this stuff that no one talks about. In the ordinary churches, they don't want to go there. The mystical stuff, right?
Pretty much. And guess what I'm saying by that is, if you can, so say you're a Christian, right? And you're a real Christian and you believe that excuse me, at the end of time, Jesus Christ will return to earth, and there will be a new Jerusalem on the planet, and people who have followed Jesus and who have followed God will receive their glorified bodies, and they will live forever, right? You'll have a body and you'll live forever. Okay. To atheists and everybody else who doesn't believe that, this is some crazy shit.
Oh, I know.
Okay?
I know.
So if you're telling me that you believe that Jesus will come back, yeah, all that stuff, which I believe too. I'm just saying, if you believe all that, but you don't believe the Old Testament basis upon which it occurs and upon which all of that stuff and all the promises and all of the prophecies, it's all based on that. So if you don't believe the Old Testament, you think the Old Testament is a bunch of pretty much like kind of like fanciful nonsense, what are we like? What are we doing here? Like either it's bullshit or it's not.
Right. It's a knife edge that forces you to decide, just like the whole idea of the resurrection and Jesus returning to life, that the mystical side of like that somebody can exist and not exist and exist again in terms of a physical presence here on earth. Like it forces you to really confront these things. And that in fact is a very good way we're ending this, because like I said in my tweets, that's where it sent me back to chapter 1. It's like, that's what I was looking for my whole life, is that a way to reconcile these incoherent things, which I think that a lot of people, the Christians you're talking about, which is not to get on them. I mean, I'm in the same camp, but I know you're not. I'm just explaining to anyone listening to this later. It's not about judging or hating people or any of that stuff. It's about the fact that unfortunately, people have to compartmentalize these things, and they ignore the inconsistencies, the incompatibilities. So, for example, when they talk in the very beginning of Genesis about God parted the waters above from the waters below and said, "Let there be light." He created the first day. He created the heavens and the earth, and he made the dry land, and he made the oceans, and then he eventually made a firmament dome. It says that. I just reread it this afternoon, preparing for this stream, and step by step he populated the world. He made the soil grow. He eventually made Adam. He made Eve from Adam's rib as a companion and helpmeet. He made the animals, and so on and so on. And then there's all the other stuff about flooding the world because he was angry that and then of course people use that to hate God. But it's like, no,
that's the best subject. I love that too. People use it to hate God, but it's one of the reasons they should love God the most. But continue. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, it's disobedience, because what it shows is, like, see, what you realize if you want to see it.
Yeah, Catalyst Vault, he's on it.
Yeah, you're right. What you realize if you want to is that the evil people who control things and control the narratives, they created all this BS. This was it a Jesuit priest, Lemaitre, who created the Big Bang business, unfortunately, but that's who created it. They created this space. They created materialism. And it all leads to cosmic despair, because people often go, when you watch enough of the videos, like this David Weiss, he always laughs because people always go, when they hear a bit of this, enough to shake them a bit, the so-called flat earth stuff, they go, well, what does it matter anyway? Like, I got to get up and go to work. I got to do this. But what it matters is, it's the underpinnings of your mental, spiritual approach to life, but you don't understand it. That cosmology you were given when you were stripped away. You weren't only circumcised if you were in North America or
Here it comes, folks. I told you.
Brutality. You were mentally brutalized because you stripped away that beautiful innocence, and you were told these incoherent things that basically ravaged the mind, right? So you were told that, and I remember how terrifying it was as a little boy. And every little kid that gets told this is terrified, because you're innocent and peaceful in your mind. But then the night after you learn that in school, or maybe your parents told you, or some other little kid told you, we're on this ball in space. And not only that, it's infinite and black, and there's no air. And if you go there, you'll instantly die. And God, who knows where God is? He's somewhere out there, but he left you alone on this planet and you're insignificant. And you're hurtling on this endless journey at 660,000, note the numbers, miles, the Earth, and the whole galaxy's moving this way, and the Earth's spinning, and it's all spinning around. You're going nowhere endlessly for no reason. And what it all does is it creates this deep cosmic despair, atheism, nihilism, where
Yes.
people aren't accountable for their actions later.
Yep.
And that it's all rolls up, and that creates these people it creates the world that we see now.
Yes.
And that's what I believe why it was done. But when you hit this, like I did, I've always been in that incoherence because I'm trying to be a good person, but I also couldn't explain, like, I don't want to believe just like people who are too zealously religious. They'll just proclaim this stuff at you. But if you challenge them like we would with this stuff, they go, "Oh, I don't want to talk about that." That's
Right.
So there was no way to reconcile it all into like puzzle pieces into an actual smoother conception. But when I came across this level plane people, I was like, oh. Now some people use it to take what's called Gnosticism, this New Age stuff, with that we're all like spiritual. We're all the earth and God, and we'll become
Yeah,
God.
my God.
I used to listen to that, but I just. So anyway, sorry I took over your thing, Patrick, but
No, you're
I just
okay.
felt like I really had to get that in there. That there's a real importance to this stuff that is not just a jokey conspiracy theory thing. There's like this really changes people's lives either for good or for bad, depending on what you believe.
Yeah. Oh, there's people out there, I think, who will do YouTube conspiracy shows because they will get an audience for it and they want to talk about it. You know, they just like to consider it, I guess. I'm everything I do now is for this conspiracy stuff. I'm trying to. The way I look at it is the world is sick and it's diluted, and I've got to do what I can do, and that's not tell everybody how they need to think and what they should think. It's try to present things so that they can think for themselves and decide for themselves, just like I was allowed to decide for myself. That's my main goal now is to just present things to people so that they can consider it and possibly choose it for themselves. Because there is that, I mean, Paul, I know you felt it, and anybody else who's out in the chat who knows this, that feeling of freedom. I'll tell you what, folks, like I tried to kill myself in 2012 3 times and had struggled with depression and anxiety, right? And once in 2018, once I had that experience and I realized it wasn't simply, oh, the authorities lying to me about the most important subject on the face of the planet. It was also a like, oh, so God is real and he does actually care about me and want to answer me. Like,
absolutely.
Those two, like, I'm not depressed anymore. I'm not anxious anymore because I can see, I don't know what the world is truly like, but I know what the lies are now. And so now it's easier. It's just a huge weight off your shoulders. And that's all I want to give people is that weight off their shoulders, you know?
Exactly. You're sharing through this great medium, which can be used for good or bad. It can be used for endless nastiness, or it can be used for things like this, which, it gives you a feeling of companionship, that you're not alone in this journey. Because if you are the black sheep in the eyes of the normie, you don't hate normie people, but it's like you're all going that way because you just got told and you're not using your faculties.
Right. And most of them are, this is going to sound elitist and stuff, but look, I've just got to say it. Most of them are not in a position where they could understand the truth. And that's the nicest way for me to phrase it.
Well, they don't want to. A
lot of people.
Because, it's like roots growing in too, because like I said, I'm in my 60s. When you get to older, and if you are a person, which many are, they get stuck in their ways. They get accumulated material worldly goods, and they get tied into networks where the maintenance and preservation and extension of their social standing and their worldly wealth is tied into acceptance.
Right.
It's kind of like a paradigm, a parallel to, even you see this in CG and you see this in streaming, and right, is that if you go against any grain anywhere, it's like the chicken yard with the chickens pecking each other. You start getting pecked by all the chickens because they don't like the disruption, because it makes people think and it disrupts the order. And people, a lot of people preserve order and money, and that gets into the atheism above truth and what you said, above love of God, and really finding your place in the great scheme of things. Like, I agree with you, Patrick. This gave me the greatest peace. I couldn't explain it. Like, I'm still a person. I have the cares of the world, of the day, sometimes the aches and pains, of getting older. But I deal with those. But the deeper ones that people have are that were like, I'm really sad to hear that you had that, you said you tried to not be here.
Don't be. It's the greatest blessing of my entire life, because
Yeah.
only by those interactions in my life and those things that happened is where I am today now.
Yeah, I
So
think I
I
understand.
wouldn't trade it in for anything.
I think I
So
understand. Well, I had some pretty bad things happen to me, you know, sort of in the material, world.
hmm
I had a house and I got completely scammed out of it, and I lost my marriage and all sorts of problems like in the last 12 years. And so I'm sort of coming out of that, but just I eventually landed on that place too, which is that, and I'm not alone in that. Many people have these things happen, like you just said, and there's all sorts of variations. But I'm just glad in the same way that I came to understand that if those things prompted me to look in and find these new things, I just thank God for it. It's like, it doesn't mean I've arrived at some final place, but I do know I don't
right.
have those deeper existential things that plagued me my whole life, and I see in other people. And that's the irony I should point out too, as I have before, is that, like, even going back to that CG King stream with the moon landings or other
Mhm.
cases, people think you're black pilled if you
They
say
think
this
you're
stuff.
depressed. You're like,
They think
no,
you're
dude,
depressed.
everything's great for me. Like,
Bro, I'm not depressed. I'm depressed like a bit sometimes, like I said, on the upper level things like if I'm having trouble making income enough, or and these, that's a little,
yeah,
but I'm not depressed on that existential, because I know that we're not living on this weird ball that's magically next door to a vacuum, but with no containment, right?
yeah,
The,
yeah.
the gravity supposedly makes everything, it's completely mad, and it makes no sense. And once I got the courage to examine it and then publicly dismiss it, like, I don't care, you can call me names, I don't care, I know I'm not alone. There are millions of people who have realized this stuff, and they don't all talk about it, but that is such a weight off your shoulders, and
Yeah.
you go,
For
finally.
for me, it's the idea of, I look around and I see how horribly, horribly shitty the world is, and how all these
Yeah.
promises have been made about fixing poverty and fixing,
Oh yeah.
drought and fixing hunger. And it's like none of those ever happened. And I go, well, then what's going on? And then I realize, oh, wait a minute. Like, the bad guys are in control.
It's a fallen
Okay.
world.
All right. That makes sense now. All right.
It goes back.
Now I can operate the way I'm supposed to be. And thank God, because to be brutally honest, I'm no pun intended, I didn't want to be the goody two shoes. I wanted to be the rebel. I wanted to be the guy blowing up the system, and the system is
Yeah.
evil, so it's fun to
Yeah, I mean,
blow it up.
because then but the thing is that you are in that sense the good soldier, because you're
Yeah.
not doing it just for nihilism. You're not blowing up and being a rebel just to blow things up.
No, no, no. It's to destroy the things that pose themselves as good, when real goodness lies out there, ready to be grasped.
Right.
So,
The maskers, the people who are the usurpers, the people who have taken over, like it's what I said in a tweet about comics, that what originally attracted me as a little kid to the beauty of comics when you first discover them. It was in the 60s, you go in the store. I was in Montreal. There's like cigar stores and places like that. Well, we went after church to not a cigar store, but we went to
nice.
my parents. I remember they'd give me money for a milkshake. It sounds very like apple
No,
pie
no.
in
It's awesome.
Americana, but
It sounds awesome.
it was 1960s, and I remember that we had Sunday school, and then sometimes I have a clear memory of I was probably 7 or 8, maybe 9, I don't remember, but here's money for a milkshake, and I'd go first to this store that was just near a few doors across the street from the church, and I think they were doing their coffee stuff afterwards. They trusted me, So I go over, I buy my comics, and then I go and get a chocolate milkshake and read my comics, and then
Yeah.
they'd meet me or whatever. And it was just wonderful, because you go in this store, there's all those like perfect, beautifully drawn racks of these comics with their flat colors, but what were they? They were tales of morality, goodness. They were in
Right.
service of
Right.
telling a little kid that there was actually truth and goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're exaggerated,
But
whatever.
they also like brought into mind like a lot of the Jack Kirby stuff in the Fantastic Four, for instance. It's not just a tale of goodness and wholesomeness, but it's also like a mind bending tale of,
Oh yeah.
hey, what about this concept? Do you
Oh
ever
yeah.
consider
Yeah.
this kind of thing? And it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
okay,
Yeah, and
so
the real one that got me was, I mean, I loved all the 60s stuff with Superman and the wacky, bizarro things, and even some of the gorilla things and Batman and all that. But what really slayed me was, I guess I was 11 and reading The New Gods. Just that took it to another whole level because he was doing religious cosmic drama,
Right.
like a hidden war, a cosmic war. It was like War of Angels and Gods, but it was hidden on Earth. It came to Earth, and then you had all these different characters, and just the way he did it, and the way he could do it. Like now, I've said this in other times, the way this guy could sit there with his cigar, staying up all night, just drawing these things like stream. Talk about streaming, right? That was before this streaming.
Yeah.
Just stream these things onto paper, and the morning would come or whatever. Roz, I got a stack of, let's pack these up and send them off. He's got another stack of like pages. The guy did 4 books for a while at once, right?
A month.
Mr. Miracle, Forever People. New Gods, Mr. Miracle, Forever People, and Jimmy Olsen for a while. When he took over Jimmy
Olsen. Those 22, 24 page books?
22 pages, something.
Yeah, so 88 pages, nearly 100 pages a month. You're saying
he's
a month, right? So
and he's not only writing it, he's keeping it all connected. He's got it in his head. He didn't write it scripts, as far as I know. He had assistants later, like Mark Evanier and Steve Sherman and people, but
we'll never see somebody like him again.
I honestly believe that.
I think that he is. I think that God put Jack Kirby here to show everybody. You know how God came to the planet and it was a human to show everybody how to be a human?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think he put Jack Kirby here to show everybody how to be a comic book artist. So that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, because it's just what you call a tour de force. You know, the French phrase. It's like that's just like cannot be equal, because even if there are some people maybe who've come close, I don't know if there are, but to drawing that many pages, but to write and draw it and keep it all, straight and put it all down. I mean, he had this whole epic in his mind. And not only that, you could even say there's another level that it was good and it had relevance to he was a human. I know for me as a little boy reading that, it's like it just spoke to me, and I was at the right age, right time. It spoke to me artistically, seeing this incredible fertility of his creation, but it also spoke to me kind of spiritually, if you will, that it was talking about good and evil, the whole thing that he did with the reversal, that Orion was from the bad planet, but he was sent in a pact to keep the peace. He was sent to the good planet New Genesis. And Mr. Miracle, Scott Free, was from New Genesis, but he was sent to Apocalypse, the bad planet, and he eventually escaped, and so on. Kirby touched on so many things. Like when you look at it, it's like he had Orion being kept down. His bad nature and face was tamped down by this. He had this mother box on his arm, and it was like, sort of AI or supercomputer, and it helped calm him. And there's this one issue he did. The super geeks would know what issue, but there's one issue he did where he gets enraged, and when he fights, his real face came out, and his friend Light Ray sees it. So his inner demon was exposed because he's from the bad planet. But then he calms himself. He passes the mother box in front of his face, and he returns to his very handsome Orion face. And what is that telling you? It's telling you all kinds of stuff. We could do a whole stream about that.
Yeah.
But just so inspiring, right? When you see that stuff. And they say, people have the nerve, some of my fellow pros, to say he was not a good writer. The chutzpah, you want to use a Jewish chutzpah to say that this guy was not a great writer. You couldn't dream of this stuff in your
right. Maybe his dialogue wasn't up to their standards, because there's a difference between writing creation and writing dialogue.
Yeah,
but yeah, I know.
I'm not in the camp, but I know that there's a lot of these sub arguments that people get into the what is it? Getting into the weeds. The clashing of the stuff. But
well, all right, folks, let's we got to end it here.
2 hours is good.
It is. Let me take I'm going to post it in the chat here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm posting in the chat here Paul's eBay. Go check that out. There's a billion different options of things. There's, as the new president of the United States, who I'm sure Paul is just overjoyed about. millions and millions of different options. Some of them are expensive, some of them are not expensive, and they're all wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So
he's entertaining, and he may bring prosperity in the short term.
Well, that's
I
for sure. He's going to bring a better economy, 100%. The one thing I would say, I mean, that might be part of the plan. If I think you and I might on the same page about what the plan could be, but
I think so.
At the same time, and I've been just being honest with people. Like, I don't want to take the wind out of anybody's sails, but till I see that Epstein client list, I can't trust him. I need the Epstein list. Once I get the first person to give me the Epstein list gets my 95% approval. But let's not get into that subject. I'm sorry, I started it, but let's not get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out tonight. It was a fantastic show. We talked predominantly about level plane and the Suez Canal, but we'll talk about giants in the next. We've got there's so many subjects we can talk about, folks. Actually, I think next time I'll do a thing like Graybeards does, where I put up a poll as to see what people want us to talk about, and I think we'll go from there. And how do you feel about every third Saturday? Because I'm off Saturdays every third Saturday, so it makes it easy for me to like get the stuff together for the show.
Yeah. Just let me know. I'd be happy to. Like I said, I want to hear what you'd say about the giant subject. I've got a few tabs and things I can share, but I'm sure there's a lot. Like I was looking on archive.org. There's books. If you search giants, I don't know if you've done that. There's old books about giants and stuff.
Oh, I've got all kinds of stuff.
I'm sure you do.
But you know how it is. There's always new things you can hear and learn. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out. If you're watching this after we've already streamed, thank you for watching this show. We really appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope that if you've got some questions or you want to challenge us in the chat, please hit me up, make comments, like this video. Please like and subscribe. If you think that what we've said here was stupid, incredibly stupid, and what you should do is you should share this stream on Twitter or X or Facebook. You should be like, these guys are really dumb, and then share the stream.
Tell all your friends to follow this guy so you can
so you can watch how dumb they are.
But meanwhile, you're telling everybody how dumb he is, but you're boosting his social media profile.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you everybody for listening, and I hope it was interesting. And my wrapping up thing would be just, and this fellow David Weiss is really good. Do your own research. He says the same thing. Is why I mentioned him. Do your own research in the sense, and you can research. Don't let people tell you, oh, that's idiotic. You can't research. Research just means learning. It just means go and learn stuff, compare stuff, think for yourself, dig up different. Because now that we have this wonderful internet compared to the library before or used bookstores, you can go dig up stuff. That's what research means. It's just go and compare. It doesn't mean you uncritically accept every single thing that you find in the internet. It means just go forth and mentally prosper. So there you go.
Yep. Don't let anybody else think for you, folks. Go look for yourself.
Okay.
Have a great night, Paul. Thank you for coming out.
You too, Patrick. Thank you.
Peace out, everybody. Goodbye. Bye.